Discussion now. For years, the NNPC has been embroiled in various scandals bordering on corruption, oil theft, and fraudulent oil deals.
Now, prior to this administration, the level of secrecy associated with the operations of the NNPC was so high that the media and key members of previous administrations did not have access to relevant information on the financial activities of the corporation.
Now, President Muhammadu Buhari appointed Ibe Kachiku as the Minister of State for Petroleum, as well as the Group Managing Director of NNPC. And Kachiku was removed as the GMD of the NNPC and replaced with Mekanti Baru. He was, however, made chairman of a new board set up for the corporation.
But since the handover, reports suggest that the relationship between both men has been rocky. Now, this has now been magnified by details of Kachiku's leaked memo to President Buhari. The minister had a closed-door meeting with the president on Friday at the Aso Rock Villa. All right, Adewale Adeoye from the Journalists for Democratic Rights joins us now to discuss this. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Nice to see you.
All right, so much, of course, has happened in the past week over the NNPC drama. The meeting between Buhari and Kachiku and, of course, Oshibajo and Mekanti Baru, the NNPC
GMD
boss, seems to have raised more questions than answers. We still don't know the outcome of that meeting. And many are saying, look, just suspend Baru until these investigations are thoroughly carried out. What are your feelings about all of this so far?
We may never get to know the content of the discussion between, the Ibe Kachiku and, the vice president and the president. But I think we should address our mind to the fundamental issues, fundamental problems facing the NNPC. That this is an institution that, having been established since 1977 on April 1st, has been rolling from one scandal to the other. And what is new about this letter is that several years after NNPC has been established, the same problem continues to haunt this institution. And it also shows that the government has not been able to find a lasting solution to the recurrent problem of corruption, of double dealing. The NNPC consistently remains a cesspool of corruption, a soakaway of double dealing, criminality, and fraud. And I think the letter coming from Ibe Kachiku has further confirmed our fear that these fundamental problems are yet to be resolved. Then if you look at that letter written by, the minister, it raised a lot of issues. He spoke about insubordination, about ethnicity, and also about corruption. And I think
lack of due process.
Lack of due process. So for me, I think these are the issues that we need to address if we really want to move the country forward. The NNPC is not just another organization.
It's the soul of
it accounts for about 40% of Nigerian gross domestic product, 76% of Nigerians' revenue generation, and over 90% of Nigerian foreign earnings. So it is at the epicenter of Nigerian political economy. So I think most Nigerians are are anxious to see a paradigm shift in the way governments of the past have handled the crisis in NNPC, and what we are really going to do today. Don't forget that between 1988 and 1993, $12.4 billion, could not be accounted for by this same institution. Pius Okigbo panel was set up. Up to today, that report is yet to be made known to the public. And there are so many series of cases of corruption. The 2007, subsidy scam, 28 billion naira, and so many other cases like that. In 2019, the current MI of Kano reported that, the NNPC could not account for 48 billion. And there was a reconciliation committee that was set up. They now say, okay, about 12 billion could not be accounted for. And then we have the Webers Group, that in an American group, that also reported that over $16 million given to some NNPC officials, because they wanted to do this Eastern gas system. And many other cases like that. There was a Swiss group in 2013 that also reported that NNPC was also involved in a lot of corruption cases. And all these things continuously are being swept under the carpet. We want to see a difference this time.
All right. Now, we have often heard, right from the days of the military, anytime a minister is appointed for petroleum, sometimes they use the tag the juicy ministry,
Yeah.
plum ministry, and all of that. And who becomes the minister is usually seen from different regions as we are entitled to this now because if you have that, we should have this, and so on.
Sure.
Now, the Minister of State for Petroleum is someone who has been a player in. He understands the workings. The president himself, who is also the Minister of Petroleum, he has also been in that industry. He understands the playing. And Mekanti Baru is also not someone who's just coming from outside. All of them understand the workings in that industry. How concerned are you that there are issues, frictions between people who understand the workings and who are supposed to give Nigerians and work for the stability of the oil industry?
Yeah, like you have said, I don't think the problem is competence. The Mekanti Baru attended ABU. He actually made first-class honors. And he has PhD in mechanical engineering. The same thing with Ibe Kwachuku. He attended Harvard, after having left UNN. So they have the best education. So I think the problem is the NNPC is always being used by the government of the day for to curry political favor. They use that as an institution, as a platform to further political interest at the detriment of Nigerian people. So they put their cronies there that could probably raise funds for them, to meet their political obligations. Until the NNPC is run as a public trust, that is run to reflect the aspirations of Nigerians, whereby people will be put there that will put the interests of Nigerians first. I think until we do that, this problem will continue to haunt Nigerians.
Well, that is exactly what Ibe Kachuku has said in calling on President Buhari to rescue the NNPC. Now, first off, let's even begin to look at some of the issues. Of course, Mekanti Baru's men, I don't know if they're quoting him himself, has said, look, this is a storm in a teacup. All of these issues raised by Kachuku and what have you. Now, we've heard that the NNPC Act does not recognize the position of the Minister of State for Petroleum. Baru, should not be faulted in the first place for going directly to Mr. President to lay whatever issues he had to lay before him. Do you fault that line of argument?
Well, I think it is a bit curious that this issue is being raised at a time of crisis. That the Constitution does not recognize minister. Why wasn't this issue raised, in 2016 when Baru was appointed? And of course, let us even take it for granted that the Constitution does not recognize the position of the current Minister of State. What about the fact that you have to award contracts without passing through due process? That people that are members of that board, are not aware of the appointments that are made. They are not appointed about contracts awarded worth over 20 billion. So I think it's really, I don't think that's a very good defense mechanism, for the group managing director. And I think there are certain things that are fundamentally, statutorily wrong with NNPC. For instance, the board must approve projects that are above 20 billion. It means the group managing director on his own can award contracts up to about 19 billion. I mean, that is really not the best. I don't
$19 million.
Oh yeah, $19 million.
Yes.
And that's, we are talking about almost 700 million naira that could be awarded by one person without consultation, without any discussion with anybody. Should we have a country where the president of the country can even award contracts worth 500 million without accounting to any organization? So I think there are certain things that are fundamentally wrong. And in fact, the structure of the NNPC itself, what is the place of the oil producing communities in this whole process? And if you look at the realignment that was done in terms of appointment, it's skewed a bit towards ethnic favoritism, which is a major problem that we have been talking about that impedes progress and development of Nigeria.
All right. Now, the statements from the GMD of NNPC and NNPC as a corporation this morning have come to debunk all of those, saying that, well, the NNPC does not even award contracts in that sense, and that besides that, all of the allegations about not passing through that, they have followed the letter of the law as much as they can. So it is their words against Kachuku, as the case may be. But let us see it from this perspective. going deep into all of this, how serious are these allegations, if really
they are true?
They are true. How serious are they?
Well, if you look at the history of NNPC, these allegations that have been raised conform with a pattern. So there are precedents.
Okay.
So we are, even in 2016, there was an internal audit that said that $1.6 million could not be accounted for under this same government. So it falls in line with the pattern that we have seen over the years. And that's why it's so easy for people to believe. And this idea of NNPC coming out with a position, I mean, they are trying to defend the institution and probably to ward off the government from instituting a probe, because it's going to affect a lot of people, you know. And that's why what the Senate has done in terms of trying to, probe this matter is good. But then we have to be a bit cautious. Is the Senate coming into this to preempt a more credible organization from probing the NNPC, or the Senate is trying to come in order to give a semblance of being, living up to its obligations?
Well, the question is, who is the more credible organization to actually probe this?
I think
EFCC has been silent on it. EFCC has not said anything so far.
Should actually be involved. It's now in the public domain, so the EFCC has no excuse. You don't need to wait for someone to write you. This thing has been put, in public domain. I expect the EFCC to pick up this matter. It is not unexpected that some people in the Senate, may be involved, because I don't expect all this corner to be avoided without some kind of political interest. So the Senate trying to probe into this, allegations and all that. I mean, it's a bit. I want the FCC to really go into this. If the federal government is not ready to set up an independent panel of inquiry, I think
but for the Senate itself, when it comes to the eyes of the law, does the Senate really have the powers to investigate this issue when it's actually under the purview of the executive arm of government?
Yeah, the Senate has, the right to probe government institutions and government officials. Yeah. So what the Senate has done is part of its oversight functions. It's right. But my question is the motive, because I'm not sure many Nigerians will agree that the Senate has lived up to public expectation in terms of fighting corruption. So there is a lot of curiosity about what is the motive behind the decision of the Senate. So quickly, within 24 hours, they've set up, they want to probe. And so it's a bit curious.
You think that was too quick? I mean, if they didn't act, the same people would complain that the Senate is not living up to its billing. But the point is, why has it taken this scandal for the Minister of State for Petroleum to have access to his principal, being President Buhari? If this had not happened, Nigerians would not have known that there has not been any interface between his, the Minister of State and the substantive minister himself, which, I mean, Buhari is the Minister of Petroleum, at least as far as we know. Yeah. Should that even be the case at all, considering the fact that oil and gas is the soul of this country?
Yeah, if you look at that letter, and if you take a psychoanalysis of, looking at that letter, it was written out of frustration, out of anger and desperation. I believe he may have exhausted internal mechanisms, and that was why he decided to write to the president. But I think it's really not right that it will take so long for somebody occupying such a strategic position to see the president. Because if there is no, easy access between the Minister of State for Petroleum and then the substantial minister, who is the president, it's really going to affect a lot of things in the country. So the president perhaps may consider a situation where he hands off that portfolio and look for a substantive, president to, a minister to take over that portfolio. I think the president has too many things on his hands. He should hands off so that things can run smoothly.
There are some reports in some quarters that many ministers don't really have access to the president as they're supposed to, and this is one example. Now, it is said that the letter from Kachikwu was leaked, but certainly from the reports we also got that he has been trying to see the president before. Now he couldn't, so the only way is to leak it so that one way or the other it would draw the president to him.
That's not to say Kachikwu leaked the letter.
Yes.
There are reports.
Of course.
Those are the reports we get. Exactly.
I think the leakage could have come from two. In fact, I suspect it was probably leaked by enemies of Kachikwu in order to demonize him and to now accuse him of externalizing, the crisis in the LPs. That's a possibility. It's also a possibility that consciously some people leak it in order to take it to public domain and to put the government. So there are two ways to look at it. But I think as we are now, we have now discovered that ministers don't have access to the president just because of a small group of people that probably think one minister is not in their good books. So I think we need to break this barrier if this country really wants to move forward. Because if ministers and heads of parastata don't have direct access, to the president, then how does the president really want to carry out his policies, his programs, when he has no access to information, or he has to get information through third parties who are most of the time self-serving.
Indeed. Okay, at this point, let's bring in Foladele I'm sure the internet is
going
I tell you,
a lot
different theories, different ideas. Let's find out.
Yeah.
Let's just check them out. Good morning, Adewale.
Good morning.
AKA Naya says, I'm just going to keep pretending I haven't heard about Dr. Kachiku, NNPC, Baru, President Buhari, and $26 million.
No, that person didn't get the figure right.
Didn't get the figure
$1 billion.
right. Billion, exactly. Ogle says, tell him to resign. The president is aware of all that Baru has been doing. Kachiku should resign honorably, and he should know when to bow out. Renaud Mokri, here we go, says the naivete of Kachiku in writing that letter to Buhari beats me. He doesn't know that Baru was brought in to do exactly what he's doing.
All right.
Eden Ethel says it was a good thing that the letter leaked to the public, and you were just talking about that. Nigerians' interests have been raised by this issue. We are carefully watching. Okay. Tunde Energy says, Baru does not see Kachiku as his boss. There is a history behind this madness. PMB should fire Baru for insubordination. Simple. And the last one here from Adekunle, who says, and I want you to pay attention to this, Adewale. There's a theory here, and I want to see if you agree with it. So Adekunle says, also, this is the third, in bracket at least, case of insubordination by an MDA CEO to a minister. Hamed Ali Adeoshun, Yusuf Adewale, Baru Kachiku. And someone went on to say that they think there is a South versus North, war going on. What do you think about this theory?
Yeah, it's not impossible. We have seen it over and over again. That when people occupy strategic political positions, they tend to use it to further their ethnic interests. So if it's happening this way, we shouldn't be surprised. It has always been one of the major problems that has continued to haunt Nigeria. People see an opportunity in any position as a way to to further the interests of their...
Do you think it's something to do with this administration? Someone else said that, but of course, because of time, I couldn't take all the tweets.
Of course.
But someone said that specifically, this administration, it seems to keep happening that there's a South versus North thing going on.
Yeah, I think it's a common feeling among Nigerians. So it is now left for the president to prove Nigerians wrong. If you look at the NNPC board, the constitution is, is a bit skewed towards one particular ethnic group, even the appointments that have been made. So it is now the responsibility of the Nigerian government to allay the fears of Nigerians and to give confidence, to the despairing population.
All right, Adewale Adeoye, the journalist for Democratic Rights, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And Fola, thank you so much. Thank you. All right, let's go on a break and then we kick with the next program. Stay with us.